Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the May 23rd, 2023 Planning Commission meeting. We have 5 discussion items on the agenda today. I would ask the commissioners to hold all questions until the conclusion of all presentations and any public comments. We start every meeting with an opportunity for the public to comment on an item not contained on the agenda. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on an item not contained on the agenda today? Seeing none, I'll move on to the consent agenda. There's one item on the consent agenda today. A vote on this item determines future scheduling and does not designate a recommendation on the details of the case. That item is rezoning Z7222 at 423 South Blunt Street. We last heard this item at our March 28th meeting, where it was deferred to allow the completion of the RHDC's review and staff documentation of the discussion, which is ongoing and should be completed by our next meeting, which is June 13th. However, our deadline for action is May 27, so staff has recommended that we request a 30-day extension. With that, I motion to request a 30-day time extension. Do I have a second?
Second.
And a second by Commissioner Rains. Is there any additional discussion or debate on the merits of the motion? Seeing none, by show of hands, those in support and any opposed, that motion passes unanimously. Moving on to old business, there are 2 items on the old business agenda today. These requests have been previously discussed, so we will hear a staff update. Item D.1 is rezoning TCZ 0923 Pool and Dowling Road. This is a request to change zoning conditions for parcels totaling approximately 6.96 acres, currently zoned commercial mixed use 3 stories conditional use with Special Highway Overlay District 1. We last discussed this item at our May 9th meeting, where we deferred the item to allow the applicant to add conditions related to cross-access concerns. We'll start with an update from Bronwyn Reedus.
Thank you. Good morning. Bronwyn Reedus, Planning and Development. Like you said, talking about TCZ 0923 at 0 Pool Road and 914 Dowling Road. Just a reminder, zoning in the area is residential to the south, office mixed use to the north, and the site itself is currently zoned commercial mixed use 3 stories conditional use, and that base zoning district is not changing with the request. Surrounded by some residential, there's existing single-family homes and a manufactured home community to the south, and then some county and city offices and operations to the north and east. Some views, east facing on Pool Road. You can see Pool Road is a pretty wide avenue, has existing sidewalk along the frontage, and then Dowling Road is a less improved road. Currently doesn't have the curb and gutter or sidewalk today. So the conditions, and you have a copy of the signed conditions in front of you, a hard copy that was passed out earlier. There has been 1 new condition added in regards to cross-access. The other conditions that you looked over on May 9th are the same, remaining the same, prohibiting some uses, limiting access on Pool Road, a protective yard along the southern property line, a transit stop easement if requested, and then some limitations on signage and external speakers. And so just for clarification, a draft condition was provided on May 12th, and then we worked together with the applicant on some language modifications just for clarity and enforceability. And so the signed conditions that were submitted on May 19th do include that revised language that we worked together on. So This condition at the bottom of the screen is the condition that was submitted, signed by the applicant or the property owners. Cross-access pursuant to UDO section 8.3.5D between properties subject to this conditional zoning district will be required regardless of exemptions, variances, or design alternates otherwise available as provided within the UDO. And then just for context, I wanted to show that section of the UDO and then highlight the exceptions that are there. So the condition does require the cross-access regardless of these available exceptions in the UDO. So we can certainly come back to this if we need to for a discussion. Just a reminder, the entitlement is increasing a little bit with the request, and that's because the removal of the... Would you like me to pause for a minute? Go ahead. Okay. The removal of the SHOD 1, the existing zoning conditions had that extended entirely across the Pool Road frontage to its intersection with Old Pool Road. That has been removed, so that increases the entitlement a little bit, increases the buildable area. The site has a slightly higher walk score than average, lower bike score, higher transportation cost index, and higher job proximity. There wasn't a transit score provided by the source, but there is a transit stop very close by. It's just a 1/10 of a mile away, Route 18 on Pool Road. The request does add to the housing supply. It retains the existing ability to place housing on the site. It doesn't include any subsidized units, but it does permit a variety of housing types, allows for smaller units through that commercial mixed-use zoning designation. There are more residents of color in this area than the citywide average, 93% for the site area versus the city average of 46%. The site area is a lower income population than the citywide average, looking at 45% for the site and 29% for the city. The linguistically isolated population is the same as the citywide average at 3%. The request is consistent with community mixed-use land use designation, and the urban form map does have I-440 as a parkway corridor, and that urban form designation is satisfied through the Special Highway Overlay District requirements. So overall, the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan. It's consistent with the future land use map and the urban form map. There are several consistent policies highlighted here. In general, consistent with what we would expect to see for development along a parkway corridor and along a highway interchange. And no inconsistent policies have been identified. So your deadline for action is going to be July 8th, and we have today, and then upcoming meetings would be June 13th and June 27th. And that concludes my update, unless you have any questions for me before we invite the applicant up.
Excellent, thank you. We'll move on to questions and comments from commissioners. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion. Commissioner Raines?
Thanks, Chair Fox. Based on the addition of the cross-access, I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated May 23, 2023, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment for case TCZ 09-2023.
And do we have a second? Commissioner Rains has offered a motion to recommend approval of case TCZ 0923, and Commissioner Bennett has offered a second. Is there any additional discussion or debate on the merits of the motion? Seeing none, by show of hands, those in favor? And any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Moving on to the next case, which is item D.2, rezoning Z8822 on Kinley Street. This is a request to rezone approximately 6.74 acres from downtown mixed-use 20 stories to downtown mixed-use 40 stories with conditions. We last discussed this case at our April 11th meeting, where we deferred the item to allow the applicant to address urban form and pedestrian access concerns. We'll start with a staff update by Hannah Recco.
Good morning. The zoning conditions have been revised. First, just a kind of reminder of how the site is situated with the various right-of-ways. Properties are on Kinley Street, which is on the street map to continue through the site to connect to Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, and then the reconfiguration of McDowell and MLK will occur, and the site does have frontage on both of those right-of-ways as well. So one zoning condition has been added that has several parts to it. It would apply to Tier 3 site plans. So the first is effectively applying a build-to the site along Kinley Street, so at least 50% of the area within 50 along Kinley Street will be occupied by a building or an amenity area within 50 feet of that right-of-way. What's unique here is that they have constructed a condition where it will apply not on a lot-by-lot basis, but 50% of the assemblage of parcels included in this rezoning on the north side and the south side separately. And that is unique from how frontage built to is measured in the UDO, which would be on a lot-by-lot basis. And then the second part is pertains to street-facing building entrances. Each building would have, within 100 feet of Kinley Street, would have at least one. It is defined in this condition as any facade that is less than a 90-degree angle from Kinley Street would count as a street-facing entrance. Part C is pedestrian connections between buildings on Kinley Street and the sidewalk would apply to buildings within 100 feet of Kinley Street. Part D pertains to surface parking, so no more than 15% of the area within 50 feet of Kinley Street would be occupied by surface parking, and it would be restricted to handicap, drop-off pickup, new resident, and rideshare parking. And then Part E prohibits surface parking within 50 feet of MLK Boulevard. And then finally, a bike pedestrian access easement would be provided on 0 Kinley Street, which is specifically right there. The property to the north, which is not included in this request, already has an access agreement, and so this would effectively just be completing the connection between Kinley and MLK along the rail right-of-way. So no real change to the overall entitlement under these changes is really around urban form, and because those conditions do speak to many of the elements of frontage, the request now would be consistent with the general guidance on the urban form map. And so case remains consistent overall with the comprehensive plan, and that UD 110 frontage would now be consistent. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Excellent, thank you. We will move on to questions and comments from commissioners. Do we have any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion. Commissioner Bennett?
Thank you, Chair Fox. I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated May 23rd, 2023, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment. The action taken is reasonable, excuse me, and in the public interest because the request would allow additional housing and jobs to locate downtown where access to destinations and transit service is high.
Excellent. And do we have a second? Commissioner Elder? Commissioner Bennett has offered a recommendation for approval of Z8822. Commissioner Elder has offered a second. Is there any additional discussion or debate on the merits of the motion? Seeing none, by show of hands, those in favor? And any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Moving on to new business, there are 3 items listed on the new business agenda today. In general, new business items have not been previously discussed, so we will hear a full staff presentation, applicant presentation, and hear from any members of the public. The first item is rezoning TCZ 0723 at the corner of Whitfield Road and Battle Bridge Road. This is a request to amend zoning conditions for a 2.52 acre site with R6 conditional use zoning to remain. New conditions limit uses to single-family detached homes and accessory uses and places of worship. We'll start with a staff presentation by Bronwyn Reedus.
Thank you. So your deadline for action on this item will be July 22nd. Existing zoning in the area, as you can see, is predominantly residential, surrounded by some R4, R10, and the site itself is zoned R6 conditional use. The site is situated at the corner of Battle Bridge Lane and Whitfield Road. As you can see, surrounded by single-family homes. There's some existing single-family homes on larger lots, and then we have the denser multiple home subdivisions as well. Here are some views of the site east-facing on Battle Bridge Road. The site is over here on the right-hand side of the screen. And then north-facing on Whitfield Road. The site is over on the left-hand side here. You can see there's an existing single-family home on the site, some existing power lines on the site as well. And there's no existing sidewalk facilities or anything in this area. All right, so the existing zoning does have one condition associated with it, that all development shall be limited to single-family detached homes and accessory uses on individual lots. The zoning condition was established with the 1997 zoning. The proposed conditions do alter this first condition a little bit by clarifying residential development and striking on individual lots. And then a second condition has been added that allows for a non-residential use to be placed on the site in the form of a place of worship. So the zoning entitlement is not changing. The maximum number of units allowed on the site would be 17. With existing zoning and proposed zoning, setbacks aren't changing. And of course, that existing zoning condition does limit the number of units that can be placed on the site. The base zoning district of R6 would allow for duplexes or accessory dwelling units that could potentially, double or triple this number. But as it is now, the number of units are staying as far as the entitlement goes. The site has a lower walk score than average, a lower bike score, a higher transportation cost index, but lower job proximity than average. And you saw in that photograph earlier, there's not a lot in the way of bike lane or sidewalk facility right around the site. No transit score was provided for the site, but the nearest transit stop is within 1 mile. It's about 3/4 of a mile away at the corner of Battle Bridge Road and Rock Quarry Road. This is a shopping center situated here at this corner. So that's where the nearest transit stop is. There isn't connected pedestrian or bicycle facilities to reach that today, though. The request does add to the housing supply. It allows for more units to be placed on the site than there is existing today. Does not include any subsidized units, does not permit a variety of housing types. And then, like we talked about, is within walking distance of transit. Rents in this area are increasing slower than the citywide average. There are more residents of color in the area than the citywide average, about 72% in the area of the site versus 46% in the citywide average. And then it has similar amounts of low-income population and linguistically isolated population as the citywide average. Nothing notable. The request is consistent with the future land use designation of low-scale residential. And overall, staff determined that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan. It's consistent with the future land use map. Consistent policies would be consistency with the future land use map, and then reinforcing the urban pattern. The condition that limits single family only, while it's inconsistent with some other policies, it is consistent with existing development in the area and would reinforce that existing urban pattern that's out there. We did find some inconsistent policies, of course, zoning for housing, which seeks to remove impediments to different diverse types of housing, wants to see more, allowing for more diversity in housing types through zoning. And then the conditional district consistency, and that's just because that particular condition that has been included is not necessarily consistent with zoning for housing, for instance. No outstanding issues have been identified. Your deadline for action, again, is going to be July 22nd, and your upcoming meetings are June 13th and June 27th. And that concludes my remarks. Do you have any questions before I invite the applicant up?
Thank you. I think at this point we'll move on to the applicant presentation. The applicant and those in support have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Good morning. My name is Ben Kuhn, 2840 Plaza Place, Raleigh, North Carolina. I am here on behalf of Church on the Rock at Raleigh, and with me today are two of the three church elders, Mr. Jerry Dodson and Tyrone Ayers, who are here in the audience. And you heard the staff report, which Bronwyn has been a delight to work with on this case, and she's done a very good job here and throughout this. I would simply go through this very well. I don't have too much to add to the staff report. This is a fairly straightforward zoning issue. It involves the property there outlined in red. That is the one that has conditions on it. The other three stacked properties to the left are also being assembled for the church use. It is not restricted in any way. It's R6, so that is not part of the rezoning case, but that property would be ultimately likely assembled for the church use. It's located on that corner. It's located in an area of single-family residential properties, most of it which was zoned in 1997, as you can see at the north, for single-family residential lots in a low-scale residential future land use designation, which is how this area has been built out. The reason why it's being rezoned is a technical issue in that the conditions arguably restricted non-residential development, even though we do think church uses are permitted in residential zones generally. It's just this condition raised a question, and we just wanted to remove any question on that. This was the condition in 1997. Development shall be to limited single-family detached homes and accessory uses on individual lots. Our proposal, as you read down there in number 1 and 2 at the bottom, residential development shall be limited to single-family detached homes and accessory uses, period. And then the second one is any non-residential development limited to a church, place of worship, synagogue, temple, whatnot, as those terms are defined in your UDO. Again, this is fairly straightforward. This would be the condition as it's to be written as we seek to amend it. And so there's no change in the underlying zoning. It's merely trying to make plain and clear that churches will be permitted here. The staff report, there's no change in density, maximum number of units. Per the staff report, it's consistent with the future land use map as well as the comprehensive plan. We believe it's reasonable in the public interest, and we request that the planning board vote in the affirmative to recommend approval of TC 723. Of course, if there are any questions, please let me know.
Excellent. If that's the conclusion of your remarks, I just want to check in and see if we have any members of the public who'd wish to speak on this item. Seeing none, I'll move on to questions and comments from commissioners. I have one point of clarification. I know you said this, just want to reiterate. The intention is to put a place of worship on the highlighted parcel, and there's no intention at this time to put housing. Is that correct?
This time, correct.
Okay. Generally, I would have a question related to why we would have the limitation on single-family detached homes, but seeing that's kind of a non-issue in this case, I'm ready to support it. But does anyone have any other questions for the applicant or for staff? Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion. Commissioner Lampman?
I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated May 23rd, 2023, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment, zoning case number TCZ 07-2023 at 4216 Whitfield Road. After considering the policy maps and other materials included in part of the comprehensive plan, the Planning Commission determines that the proposed zoning amendment is consistent with the comprehensive plan and other adopted plans and consistent with the future land use map, and the request should be approved.
Excellent. And do we have a second? Commissioner Elder? Commissioner Lampman has offered a recommendation for approval of TCZ 0723, and Commissioner Elder has offered a second. Is there any additional discussion or debate on the merits of the motion? Seeing none, by show of hands, those in favor? And any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Moving on to item E.2, which is rezoning Z1023 on Carolina Pines Avenue and Cherry Circle. This is a request to rezone approximately 15.6 acres from residential 10 conditional use to residential mixed use 5 stories conditional use. We'll start with a staff presentation by Sarah Shaughnessy.
Hi, good morning. Sarah Shaughnessy, Raleigh Planning and Development. So this is a request, again, to rezone 15 and a half acres from residential 10 conditional use to residential mixed use 5 stories conditional use. Your deadline for action is July 8th. So zoning in the area is predominantly residential, surrounding to the west with some commercial uses along South Saunders Street and Wilmington Street. An aerial view of the site. So this site is adjacent to Carolina Pines, which is just to the north of the site. The Norfolk Southern Rail borders the site to the west. And then it sits just north of the Z9122 case that you heard for parcels on Iliagnis Road. So that's Raleigh Municipal Lake down there and Peach Road Park to the south. Some views of the area. So the top is looking south, looking south on Carolina Pines Avenue. Some views of the existing homes, and then the commercial uses on South Wilmington Street. There are 3 proposed conditions. 1 is to prohibit cemeteries as the principal use. 2 is to require the construction of a greenway and a dedication of an easement for that greenway that would potentially connect the greenway, if it is constructed in the parcel or the site assemblage on the south, to Carolina Pines. And then the 3rd condition limits residential entitlement to 620 dwelling units. Looking at the existing compared to the proposed zoning would entitle a lot of additional housing units, and also, because it is a mixed-use district, would allow for office and retail uses. There's a higher walk score in this area than the city average, also a higher transit score. There is a lower bike score than average, higher transportation cost index, and a higher job proximity compared to the rest of the city. Existing bus service, there's the Route 7, which travels north-south along South Saunders Street, and then the Carolina Pines Connector, which is a connector route that goes east-west. And then, I'm sure as you know, this is also very close to a future BRT station, the Southern Corridor BRT. Regarding affordability, this request would add to the housing supply, though it does not include subsidized units. It would permit a variety of housing types, allow smaller units and smaller lot sizes than citywide average, and then again within walking distance of existing and future transit. There are a higher percentage of residents of color in this area, a higher percentage of low-income earners, and also a higher percentage of residents with lower or less than a high school education. The requested zoning of RX5 CU is inconsistent with the low and moderate scale residential that the future land use map envisions. So if approved, this would require a future land use map amendment. Because it's in a frequent transit area, that urban form designation recommends an urban or a hybrid frontage. No frontage is proposed as part of this request, although the site does have challenging topography. I think it's about 15% the slope at its steepest, which may be, a reason that no frontage was proposed in this case. Consistent overall with the comprehensive plan, even though it is inconsistent with the future land use map and the urban form map. The consistent policies, conditional use consistency, connectivity, capitalizing on transit access, housing variety, to name a few. Also would provide additional development and housing on a site that's currently vacant, and is consistent with some area-specific guidance about enhancing and improving overall connectivity in this area. The two inconsistent policies would just be the future land use map inconsistency and the policy dealing with frontage. Again, your deadline for action is July 8th. There are no outstanding issues. Staff did have some clarifications to the greenway condition, which we believe can be made as a technical correction after you make a recommendation, just to clarify what the city would be responsible for. And then, as I mentioned before, if approved, this case would require a future land use map amendment because the request is inconsistent with the current designation. So that's a map of what that would look like. Happy to answer any questions before you hear from the applicant.
Thank you. At this point, I'd like to hear from the applicant team. The applicant and those in support have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Chair Fox, members of the Planning Commission, Samuel Morris with Longleaf Law Partners, 4509 Creedmoor Road, Suite 302. Here on behalf of the property owner and applicant, I'm also joined this morning by Daniel McGlamory, who is the project engineer. We are here today seeking to rezone 15.61 acres, a two-parcel assemblage located along Carolina Pines Avenue from its current R10 CU designation to RX5 CU. The property owner is seeking to rezone this property to RX5 to increase allowed height and create some more flexible options regarding parking and essentially, allowing for a more efficient development of this property given some recent changes and environmental conditions that exist on site, which we'll discuss further here shortly. Here's a look at this relatively large two-parcel assemblage located in South Raleigh along Carolina Pines. As Sarah said, it's located between the Norfolk Southern Railroad on the west and then South Saunders to the east. And this wider view shows you the property's location in proximity to Peach Road Park and Cultural Center, as well as the Iliagnis Road assemblage, which you all did recommend for approval to RX5 last month. and that is, of course, just to the south. Property is currently zoned R10CU. It was rezoned back in middle of 2018 for the purposes of accomplishing three-story multifamily. A site plan was even submitted a number of years ago following that rezoning. But during that period, the city of Raleigh adopted the Carolina Pines roadway improvement project, which is going to be taking relatively large swath of land along the entire frontage of Carolina Pines that chewed up large amounts of developable area, places where buildings were slated to go. So it killed that three-story multifamily development that was submitted for approval a number of years ago, and that was kind of the basis of that rezoning. We'll discuss the roadway improvement. I've got some images. We'll show you a little bit more about the impact that had. But really, this new request is to seek increased height entitlement to 5 stories to recoup on that lost developable area and create some more flexible parking options to just get a more efficient development on the site. As you just heard, the property currently has kind of the split future land use map designation, and this is just like you just heard, approving this rezoning would amend it to medium-scale residential. The current future land use map is a reflection of the 2018 rezoning and conditions that were included. So this was the 2017-2018 Raleigh City Council, it was important to them to limit that frontage along Carolina Pines to only 6 units per acre. They did not want to see high-level density along Carolina Pines. So that is why you see that low-scale designation. And then the limited amounts of public park and open space are a reflection of a prior city policy of mapping buffer areas as public park and open space on the future land use map, which they have stopped doing. So if that had been rezoned today, those would not have been included as public park and open space. Did confirm that with city staff during our pre-application meeting. So in our mind, it's more fairly characterized as a moderate-scale residential property, generally. Urban form map, as you heard, we are located within a frequent transit area and in close proximity to a planned BRT station. And now I just want to quickly go through some of the unique circumstances on this property that make it challenging to develop. First, there is a USGS Blue Line stream flowing through the property from Raleigh Municipal Lake northeast towards Carolina Pines and South Saunders. These will be subject to riparian buffers, which will substantially limit the developable area on the property, particularly up in that northeast corner. You know, up here gets hit really bad, down here gets hit really bad. So that is kind of the first layer of limitations of developable area. The next is the Raleigh Street Plan has designated multiple street extensions on this property. As you can see, it calls for Steel Street to extend through the property down to Iliagnis Road. And it also calls for Cherry Street to be extended to the new Steel Street extension. So these will substantially improve the connectivity and circulation in this area, however, come with, large losses of developable area, massive infrastructure costs with those roadway extensions, intersections, and all of the associated infrastructure development that goes along with multiple roadway extensions. And on the right, you see the neighborhood street designation, which that is reflective of that dotted green line. And here's a look at that Carolina Pines roadway improvement project. That is, as you can see, impacting the property pretty severely, and which rendered the prior 3-story multifamily development impracticable. Originally, the plan was to split the dedication or taking between properties on the south side of Carolina Pines and properties on the north side of Carolina Pines. However, during the process, plans changed, and recognizing that the southern property was undeveloped, the city took the entirety, 100% of the taking occurred on our property. And as you can see, in addition to just the kind of roadway improvements, multi-use path, all that, there's going to be a bus station and a number of these kind of green areas which reflect various City of Raleigh easements that limit developable area along the Carolina Pines frontage. So with all these considerations in mind, the property owner is seeking to rezone to RX5, again, to maximize the remaining developable area, get some more increased flexibility parking options, basically the ability to possibly park underneath residential units. So our conditions: 1, limit cemetery use; 2, maximum of 620 dwelling units, mainly to avoid a TIA at the rezoning stage. I don't believe the vision of the property is not to have 620 dwelling units. We don't anticipate hitting that number. And finally, most importantly, is the commitment to dedicate and construct a Raleigh Greenway extension through the site. Here is just a kind of quick visual of the proposed Greenway plan as it exists. There's, again, 2 rezoning cases that are related to this. So just on a high level, this is not on the Greenway plan. It's just an opportunity that was identified by staff and various property owners as a way to impute a major public benefit to this area that could be accomplished through these 2 rezoning cases that conveniently happen to be going through the pipeline at the same time. So again, this has just been kind of voluntary coordination between the property owners and staff to accomplish this. So the yellow is the conceptual layout for that Z9122 case that you already recommended approval for. And the green shows basically what our responsibility is. Like that case, we do not set forth a specific location or route. We basically just say, we must connect somewhere along this property line to somewhere along Carolina Pines. So it could take any possible number of routes depending on environmental factors, building layout, etc. But there is, at the baseline, a commitment to connect from point A to point B. And the one kind of distinction we'll make is that, as you heard, we have committed to constructing the Greenway, although Z9122, I do not believe, has committed to construction through their zoning conditions. That's something that we have expressed a willingness to commit to and look forward to working with them and the city to accomplish the best way of ensuring that this is developed in a cohesive, kind of holistic way. So with that, we respectfully request that you all recommend approval of this rezoning case, and me and Daniel are happy to take any questions that you all have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I just want to check in and see if there are members of the public who wish to speak on this item. And I'm going to say there's no one else here, so no. So we'll move on to questions and comments from commissioners. Do we have any questions or comments?
Thanks, Chair Fox. With site limitations, I know this is probably an unusual request, but for the use, I would recommend a removal of the telecom tower from this site as a condition. I would remove it as a allowable use on this site.
Thank you. Thank you. The applicant want to just hop up for a second? Have you contemplated limiting any other uses, or do you have any questions or comments for Commissioner Raines?
We have no issue limiting telecommunications towers on the property.
Excellent. Okay. Generally, I would have an issue with the height being different than what was contemplated in the future land use map. However, given the adjacent rezoning and some of the environmental limitations, this is actually a little bit more environmentally friendly to keep your footprint a little bit smaller and allow a little bit more height. I have no other issues with this case. Let me just check if anyone else has any questions or comments. Commissioner O'Haver or Commissioner Bennett?
Tagging on to what you just said, Chair Fox, the rezoning that we recommended approval for south of this is in an area where the future land use was medium-scale residential though, right? So it wasn't limited, or the recommendation wasn't 4 stories like it is here. Is that correct?
The future land use map designates the area to the south for Z91 as medium scale residential. That request was also RX5 conditional use.
But the future land use for this area
Is split between moderate scale and low scale residential.
Right, okay. I guess that's the distinction I'm trying to make. So the recommended height for the rezoning to the south was consistent with the future land use map.
Correct. I think I don't want to misstate what the applicant said. It looked like the split on the future land use map was actually mimicking the previous rezoning, and it wasn't mimicking other policy goals. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, that's correct. It was not, this future land use map designation was not a result of the policy-based future land use mapping process. It was a reflection of an individual property being rezoned. And the current council's
Okay.
concerns regarding density on this property, and therefore they limited density to 6 units per acre on the front portion and the R10 designation on the back. And that's a reflection of that. Yes.
Do you have any other questions? Any follow-up?
No, I don't. I'm thinking.
Okay.
I'm thinking.
Commissioner O'Haver, did you have a question as well?
Did I miss why the, especially since the Carolina Pines expansion is going to be done to the south, why there was no frontage and why there's not an opportunity to provide a frontage to make it consistent with the urban format? Did I miss that?
No, yeah, we're happy to answer that. Sarah touched on it during her presentation. Largely driven by environmental factors and limitations on developable area. Again, constraints on site, that on-stream site, the new streets going through Carolina Improvement Project, all just kind of pinch developable area and create sort of uncertainty on where buildings can actually be located. And on a high level, we think, given the difficulties in, guaranteeing that buildings can be pushed up against the road, that the greenway condition is kind of our contribution to the urban form, the urban fabric in the area. Assuming this rezone's approved, people will be able to get off at the BRT station, walk down the new and improved Carolina Pines, mosey through a city-maintained greenway on our site and access the Peach World Cultural Community Center. We think that that's how we can contribute to urban form, at least in this stage, and do, plan to maximize the roadway improvement projects to the greatest extent possible, but it's largely environmental and grading issues and uncertainty with the kind of multi-level limitations on development.
Then I have a question for staff. The condition is limiting to 620 units. I missed the slide in there that a lot of times you'll say
What's
the
currently
current zoning.
entitled?
Yeah. I
pull
mean,
that
they're
up for
limiting
you.
it to 620, but if we go to RX 5CU, what would the number be? Does that make sense? Am I asking that right?
The slide doesn't show what it would be without the condition. I don't know off the top of my head what that is. This was a condition offered to avoid the TIA trigger. So if residential entitlement were not capped in this way, they would be required to do a TIA because of the change in trip generation.
So the number is higher.
I'm going to tag on to your previous question, Commissioner O'Haver, about the frontage on Carolina Pines. It does seem like the location of the building footprint is somewhat limited. So meeting a build-to might be challenging, but perhaps controlling where the parking is located might ameliorate any concerns about frontage. Am I overstating your opinion? Okay. The applicant, have you considered conditions to limit or locate parking?
Hey, good morning. Danny McGlamory, Drive McGlamory Engineering, civil engineer for the project. There's no plan, even the plan that was submitted with the 3-story, there was no parking submitted between the buildings. We are doing building frontage, and mainly if you look at the topography, it's a drastic slope from where Steel Street is going to be extended. It's a pretty drastic slope from Carolina Pines down to the creek. As you can see, everything falls away from those roads. So one of the key getting to the RX-5 is to be able to do the basement parking without some of the limitations of R10, of making sure that that story is, 50% or fully underground. So the intent of going to this would be to kind of limit the site disturbance due to the amount of grading required to bring up any site. So we're looking at a lot of, below level parking, and if there is surface parking, we imagine 90% of that will be beside or behind the building, not along the street.
Excellent. Does that mitigate your concern? Or are you also interested in a condition that limits parking?
Yeah, it sounds like they've already looked at it, and it seems like it wouldn't be an issue to add that condition is what it sounds like.
No, I mean, even the preliminary site plan that was submitted with the 3-story buildings, I think pretty much all of the parking was in, behind the buildings off the street. So I think that's certainly something we can discuss.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments for the applicant or staff? Commissioner Bennett?
I just want to make sure I'm clear about what I brought up previously. I want to make sure I understand. So the policy, the height policy, that it's inconsistent with isn't actually the city's recommended policy for that area, but rather something that came about as a result of a rezoning for that area.
That sounds like what I heard as well.
I want to be clear because oftentimes we get comments from the public where they're trying to understand these things. And I try to understand these things, and I try to explain it in a way that people can understand. So if someone were looking at this and they said, oh, it's inconsistent, and we go, well, not really. I want to make sure we make clear why we're saying that. So the policy that it's inconsistent with is actually inconsistent with city goals currently.
I think that's a good way to put it, yes.
Okay. If I could just ask then staff, when we have a situation like this, can you make it bold and red and underline and just make it clear that it's inconsistent with this policy, but because of X, Y, and Z? Because when I look at inconsistent, it's inconsistent. And I would imagine members of the public do too. And they come and they this is inconsistent, you shouldn't approve it.
Sure, yeah, we can certainly do a better job of acknowledging the case history. I think it is state law that we change the future land use map to match the zoning designation. So it is consistent with what the city envisions for the area, the future land use map designation as it is written, and it is technically inconsistent with that policy. The history is that that designation may have been different in the past. So we can fully explain that, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to be sure that I'm clear. So it's inconsistent, but it's consistent with the future vision. It seems like we're saying it's consistent with the past vision, but not a future vision. I just want to make sure I'm
So
clear
it's
on that.
inconsistent with the future land use map. It's consistent
Which
with the
was
number.
changed because of a rezoning.
That's correct.
Okay.
And then staff is also saying that it's consistent with a number of other policies beyond the future land use map.
Okay.
That would support, yeah.
Okay.
Any additional questions or comments for either staff or the applicant?
I did have one other. I'm
Okay.
sorry. There are no flooding concerns for this site?
You have stormwater staff here to speak on that.
Sally Hoyt, Raleigh Stormwater. This site has a stream through it. It is not in the FEMA delineated floodplain, but because of the length of stream and the presence of flood-prone soils, the applicant would be required to do a flood study at the time of application.
So there's nothing they need to do now in terms of a condition?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. If I could get the applicant to hop back up again. Just because I'm trying to make sure you get a thigh workout, standing and sitting. Okay. There you go. I just want to check. It sounds like we are going to defer this case to allow you to contemplate conditions related to removing the telecom tower use and perhaps some frontage-like conditions limiting parking along Carolina Pines. Does our June 13th meeting give you sufficient time to be able to do that?
Yes.
I believe we have a fifth
We have a
Tuesday
fifth, so we've got an
this
extra
month.
week.
Yeah.
Yes, so we definitely can. And as Sarah mentioned too, we have some technical work to do on the Greenway condition, so that's perfect. Hopefully we can come back that day with everything tightened up.
Excellent.
Okay, I've got one more question for staff. The infamous dashed lines. The proposed alignment was shown up there, but it wasn't shown with the creek. I assume that staff put it in the most ideal situation to limit the amount of disturbance to the creek.
Good morning, Monique Guyant with Transportation. I just wanted to make sure you're talking about the street plan dashed lines, correct? Yeah, so those lines, they're not in specific points, but they're more focused on the connections that those lines provide. So the alignment can change with the site plan.
It seems like I have an issue with that every time, because when we want to change the alignment, we're told that's where it needs to go. But if that's the answer, okay, great, thank you.
It's a whisper of a recommendation of a future potential road, not an actual alignment. Yeah.
The Steel Street alignment is fairly nailed down from the previous submittal. You can see where Steel Street, there's a small jut off of Iliagnis, and it will come off of Iliagnis to the current Steel Street, and it pretty much crosses the stream at a 90-degree angle to limit disturbance to that. It's sort of where the property starts to get narrow, moving northeast on Carolina Pines. That Steel Street is just southwest of that, so that's the alignment right there. So we're kind of meeting the street design manual requirements for horizontal curves and vertical curves, at the same time. But it's basically a left, kind of a consistent left-hand turn from Iliagnis over to Steel Street. But it does cross at a 90-degree angle, yes.
If there are no further questions or comments, without objection, we will. You have another question? Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Bennett.
Blame Commissioner O'Haver. She started talking about streets. I know the limiting the build out avoided the TIA trigger for the rezoning. When it comes to site design and traffic is actually analyzed, I'm assuming it'll factor in these reworked streets. Would it also factor in that the rezoning that was just approved or recommended for approval to the south?
Monique Guyant with Transportation again. And so it would depend if that site comes in for like an approved subdivision or if they have already started their approval process with site plan. Typically, if they have, we will include that in a background for like adjacent traffic or development taking in the area. But if it is still undeveloped, that the traffic study for this site would not take into account unsubmitted development plans.
Okay, thank you.
Just have one. Is the site currently undeveloped? Completely undeveloped. Okay. I have a general question. I think this is the second one we've seen that has demographic information for the specific site. And I'm curious, in general, how we get site-specific demographic information on sites that do not have any inhabitants.
So sure, that's a good question. It is actually the census tract that includes the site. And so it's from the U.S. Census, the most recent 5-year estimates from the American Community Survey.
Okay, just going to check in, make sure there are no other questions or comments. Okay, we are going to recommend deferral of this item to our June 13th meeting. Excellent. Moving on to the last item on the new business agenda, which is rezoning Z1723, the west side of Jones Franklin Road. This is a request to rezone just over 2 acres from office mixed use 3 conditional use to office mixed use 4 conditional use. As I understand, staff recommends a deferral of this item until the applicant has met UDO requirements for planning commission review. So I want to check quickly, make sure there are no members of the public who wish to speak on this item. Seeing none, we will defer this item to our June 13th meeting. Is that okay?
Oh, it would be helpful if you, I'm sorry, which case are you talking about?
The last item.
Yeah, could you please defer that until it's satisfied all UDO requirements for planning commission review, please?
Excellent.
Thank you.
So to a date uncertain, this item is referred to a date uncertain where all UDO requirements and noticing has been made. Okay. All right. Excellent. I think.
Carolina Pines was deferred to the 13th.
Correct.
Yes. Okay.
Correct. Now we're going to move on to approval of the minutes. Draft meeting minutes for May 9th Planning Commission meeting are included in the backup. I just wanted to verify one item in the agenda. It said that 2 items were sent to the Strategic Planning Committee. I just wanted to verify that that was an accurate statement, or if only 1 item was referred to strategic planning. Okay, so I think we just need to amend that item in the minutes. Are there any other comments about the minutes? Okay, no other comments. Then with that edit, I would like to make a motion to approve the minutes. Do I have a second? Excellent, thank you, Commissioner Bennett. Any other discussion or debate on the minutes approval? No? By show of hands, those in favor? And any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. And report from the chair. Do you want to note in June we will do elections for new chair and vice chair? I recommend we consider doing that at the June 13th meeting, as I will not be here for the last meeting in June because I will be in Italy. Be jealous, people. Anyway. And I have no other report other than that. Be jealous. Okay. Now, report of the members. If anyone wants to go down, and I will do the report for Commissioner Miller, who's absent and excused. Committee of the Whole is meeting this Thursday at 4 p.m. in 305 in this building. There are 2 items on the agenda, but only one of the items, there's 3 items on the agenda, but the Z9222 will not be discussed at this time. That will be discussed at a future meeting, the date of which we are currently scheduling, correct? Okay. Okay, and then I'll just go down through the line. Any report?
No report from me.
I think this is officially my last interim meeting as a member of the Planning Commission. It has been a pleasure and a wonderful experience learning from all you more experienced commission members. I will say, I think we have recently learned that until an official resignation or a reappointment, quorum stays the same, so I may
You continue
still
to
be
serve,
around.
yes. You continue to serve until your replacement is appointed, unless you are no longer eligible to serve because you moved out of the jurisdiction
Okay.
or you resign.
Okay.
So
even though I guess this may be the last time I sit with you guys at a regular Planning Commission meeting, if someone else is appointed in the meantime before the June meeting, so. But I'll be here.
Thank you.
Thursday.
It has been a pleasure serving with you. We'll miss you. Infrastructure and Mobility is meeting on Thursday, the 25th at 3. I thought I saw room 303. What is it, 305?
The agenda says 305. The agenda says 305.
Okay, in room 305. And we will have Partners for Environmental Justice discussing green stormwater infrastructure.
I'm jealous of Italy. We have a text change committee meeting June 7th. And I apologize, I forget what case that is.
It's the TOD revisions.
TOD revision, thank
right.
you. And One Exchange Plaza, 8th floor. And I also enjoyed working with you on the commission.
No report.
Strategic Planning Committee is meeting in June 8th, room 303 at 4 p.m. We'll be discussing the CP 1122 housing location policy. Thank you. And yes, enjoyed working with you, serving with you. Thank you.
I didn't mean to be callous not to say I'll miss her, but I see her in the neighborhood all the time. So
Small world. Moving on, report from the Assistant Director.
I did wonder if we could advance the discussion about the Committee of the Whole special meeting date with us, since we have 7 of 10. So Chinitha had circulated a message with 6 possible dates: May 30, June 16, June 23, the 28th, the 29th, or the 30th. And I wonder if you could just kind of look at your calendars, maybe we could do a show of hands and get a sense of, does the 30th work?
May 30th.
May 30th. I get 3, that's not enough. We would do 4, right?
That one didn't work.
That one doesn't work. The 16th, June 16th at 4. That is a Friday. That's a no. The 23rd, which is also a Friday. That's a no. The 28th, which is a Wednesday. That's 3, 4. The 29th, which is that Thursday. 1, 2, 3, 4. And the 30th, which is Friday, which I'm guessing is, you just are opposed on principle to Fridays, I believe. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think we open ourselves up to criticism from the public if we have
we
a
do a
Friday
Friday at
evening
4 on the
meeting,
weekend.
so.
Yeah, okay, so we're looking at the 28th and the 29th. We have 4 folks who can do each of those. Does anybody, I can follow up with folks, Ms. Miller, well, we need her to chair the committee, among other things, Mr. Dautel and Otwell, and see if, do you have responses from any of them for those 2 dates?
Board meeting on the 28th.
Mhm. Yeah, that's fair.
That one starts at 5 as well, so.
Looks like we're sort of entertaining the 28th or the 29th. Janitha and I will follow up with,
Is available on the 28th, 29th, and 30th.
all right, sweet, so we have 5.
But
We need 6,
mine is like a maybe, right? Because somebody might be named in the meantime. That's not me.
Even if somebody was named on the 6th, I don't think we would be able to offer them adequate training to begin their service until after the break.
Okay.
And Blaney is available.
Okay, great, the 28th? So
28th
that,
and 29th.
okay, so that puts us at 6 for both those meetings. So anybody have any preference here we need to know about? Okay, so let's plan on the 29th.
No, wait.
What's
That was
wrong?
the 28th.
What?
I thought we were saying the 28th.
Well, we have 6 for the 28th or the 29th.
I'm not available on the 29th.
Okay. And Ms. Lampman is not available on the 28th.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
how would you all like to decide that?
Show of hands, preference for the 28th.
For the what?
Show of hands, preference for the 28th.
I'll put it on the 28th.
Okay? That is a Wednesday. Show of hands, preference for the 29th. And you don't care either way. I think I need a day to get over jet lag. I'm just kidding.
Well, there makes some sense to have it on a Thursday if Thursday's when the
Yeah.
committee of
Yeah.
the whole normally meets. And so
Yeah,
I
there
know
is some
we've tried to do
consistency
that.
there. However, acknowledge, is a different
No, I'll be here.
time of day? Okay, excellent.
It's my birthday, so I will have to cancel my plans, but I will be here on the 29th.
You do not have to cancel plans. We'll work. Okay. Okay.
We'll bring you a cake.
Okay, so we'll make that announcement
On
Thursday.
Yes. I really appreciate everybody working with us on this. As you know, the real pinch point for us is that we cannot discuss this item in 305. That room is not adequate to accommodate the public interest in this item. And your committee of the whole meeting that happens in 305 is up against the certificate of appropriateness committee meeting that happens in this room at the same time. That must be recorded because of the quasi-judicial nature of the proceedings. And so to have Cal in a bigger space, we always have to find a special time. And I appreciate that that is inconvenient for you all. It is just as inconvenient for you as it is for staff. And I appreciate you all working with us to accommodate the public in a hospitable manner. I very much want for us to be sincere and authentic in actually hearing from people during your discussion of a very big comprehensive plan amendment that reflects all the planning work that went into station area planning for New Bern, as well as the application of the transit overlay district in the New Bern corridor and some base district changes there as well. So appreciate the team effort. Thank you so much. That's plenty from me.
Okay, thank you, Bynum. Go ahead.
Bynum, I pulled up the Infrastructure and Mobility Committee announcement. It does say room 303.
The email says that?
Well, when I opened it up, the agenda does as well.
I just looked at this at the beginning of this meeting.
And it takes it a minute to come up.
Yeah.
Yep. Raleigh Municipal Building, room 303.
Great.
All right. And then we'll just move next door for the,
Cal.
right.
That makes sense. I think we have it that way so that,
One can set up while the other's still meeting.
yeah. Thank you for the correction. I appreciate that.
Excellent. Is there anything else for the good of the order? Commissioner Raines?
Sorry, quick question. That's caught my eye. It says at the time of the report, there was a 66% increase in units planned. Was that 66% increase from one year to the next, or what was that? It was referencing the State of the Downtown Raleigh 2022 report.
Oh, let me look at that.
It's just a question for knowledge.
Mhm.
And Bynum, if you want to just
Right, so
send a,
what's your question again?
there was,
It says the 66,
yeah, was that from year to year, or was that over a certain number of years, or?
I think that the number of units currently planned and under construction represents 66% of what already exists in downtown. So that's saying what's currently planned and in construction right now
Oh, okay,
would be 66% more than what's already here.
okay. I mean, that's
Yes.
significant.
Yes. Yes.
I didn't, okay,
I mean,
thank you.
think
Thanks for the
about, think
clarification. I
about
didn't know if it was just
every
in
40-story request you've seen in the last year, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. It's hopping.
all right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. If there's nothing else, that concludes this meeting of the Planning Commission.